First sound anyone heard in the silent hospital corridor was a woman crying. Not softly, not politely, but the kind of crying that comes from a heart that has held hope for too long and is finally breaking. Nurses froze. Doctors looked away. And standing just outside room 317, a tired single father named Daniel Carter closed his eyes and whispered a prayer he had been saying for years. Lord, if this is the moment, let it be your will. Daniel was not supposed to be there. He was a nobody in a world of billionaires, a widowed mechanic who fixed broken things with oil-stained hands. Yet somehow, he had become the last hope for Grace Whitmore, the disabled daughter of tech billionaire Jonathan Whitmore and his wife, Elizabeth Whitmore, a family that had everything except the one miracle money could not buy. Grace had been born with a rare neurological condition that left her unable to walk and barely able to move her hands. From the day she was born, Elizabeth had promised herself that her daughter would never suffer. Jonathan poured billions into research, hearing the best doctors from Europe, Asia, and America, experimental therapies, cutting-edge machines, private hospitals that looked more like five-star hotels. But year after year, the verdict was the same: no cure, minimal improvement. Prepare for a lifetime in a wheelchair. Grace was 10 years old now, bright-eyed, soft-spoken, and painfully aware that other children ran while she watched. Elizabeth never let Grace see her cry, but at night, alone in her marble-floored bathroom, she would collapse to the floor and sob until her chest hurt. Jonathan, powerful and composed in public, grew quieter at home, his confidence eroded by a problem he could not solve. Daniel Carter understood that kind of pain. 5 years earlier, Daniel's wife Rachel had died from cancer, leaving him alone to raise their son Caleb. Bills piled up. Sleep disappeared. Faith was all Daniel had left. He worked days at a garage and nights repairing old medical equipment for extra cash. That was how fate, or God, placed him in the Whitmore mansion one rainy evening. One of Grace's specialized mobility systems had malfunctioned. The manufacturer sent technicians who couldn't fix it. Out of frustration, Jonathan's assistant called a small repair service. Daniel arrived in worn boots, carrying a toolbox older than his marriage. Elizabeth barely noticed him at first, but Grace did. "Are you going to fix it?" Grace asked softly from her wheelchair. Daniel smiled warmly. "I'll do my best, sweetheart." As Daniel worked, Grace watched every movement. When he finished, the system didn't just work, it worked better. The chair moved smoother, responded faster. Jonathan was impressed. Elizabeth was grateful. But what stayed with her was the way Daniel knelt down to Grace's level and asked her about her favorite books, as if she were the most important person in the room. Over the next few months, Daniel was called back repeatedly. Fix this, adjust that. He became a familiar presence. Grace trusted him. Elizabeth noticed something strange. After Daniel's visits, Grace seemed calmer, happier, more hopeful. One afternoon, while Daniel adjusted a therapy device, Grace asked, "Mr. Daniel, do you think God still makes miracles?" The room went quiet. Daniel paused, then said gently, "I think he never stopped." That sentence changed everything. Elizabeth overheard. Later that night, she found Daniel in the garage and asked him what he meant. He told her about Rachel, about praying when doctors said there was no hope, about losing anyway and still believing. "I'm not a preacher," Daniel said. "I'm just someone who's seen broken things work again, sometimes in ways no one expects." A week later, Elizabeth made an unusual request. She asked Daniel to look at Grace's old therapy notes and equipment, not as a doctor, but as someone who understood mechanics and systems. Jonathan was skeptical, but Elizabeth had learned that desperation sometimes opens doors pride keeps closed. Daniel studied everything carefully. Patterns emerged, tiny inconsistencies doctors had missed because they were too focused on theories, not function. He suggested a radical combination of physical stimulation and mechanical resistance using modified therapy devices. Nothing dangerous, just different. Doctors laughed. Jonathan hesitated, but Elizabeth saw something in Daniel's eyes, humility, not ego. They tried it. Progress was slow, painful. Grace cried some days. Elizabeth wanted to quit more than once, but Daniel encouraged them gently, reminding Grace that strength often comes disguised as struggle. Then one quiet morning it happened. Grace's finger moved. Just a little, barely noticeable, but Elizabeth saw it. She screamed. Doctors rushed in, tests were run. The movement happened again and again. Over weeks, Grace's control improved. Muscles responded, nerves awakened. Something no machine had accomplished was unfolding in front of them. The day Grace stood, supported, trembling but standing, Elizabeth broke down completely. She dropped to her knees in the therapy room, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching Daniel's hands. "You did this," she cried. Daniel shook his head, tears in his own eyes. "No, God did, I just showed up." News spread quietly at first, then everywhere. Media called it a miracle. Jonathan offered Daniel a 7-figure job, a company, anything he wanted. Daniel asked for only one thing: funding for a small foundation to help families who couldn't afford therapy for disabled children. Grace eventually walked on her own, not perfectly, not easily, but freely. On the day she took her first independent steps, she walked straight to Daniel and hugged him. "God still makes miracles," she said. And for the first time in years, Elizabeth cried, not from pain but from gratitude. The story of Daniel Carter reminds the world that miracles don't always come from power, money, or brilliance. Sometimes they come through broken people who still believe, through faith that refuses to die, through love that kneels down and says, "I'll do my best." And sometimes that's enough to change everything.